So, Justice and Correctional Services Minister Ronald Lamola's ex-firm has been caught up in allegations of hiding corruption. A GroundUp article suggests that the firm, Ndobela Lamola Inc, allegedly assisted in covering corruption at the National Lottery. We spoke to GroundUp earlier, so let me now bring in the Justice and Correctional Services spokesperson, Chrispin Phiri. Chrispin, thank you so much for your time on eNCA this afternoon. We spoke to GroundUp earlier. This article and investigation they've done suggests that at the time that these reports that were allegedly littered with forged documents were worked on, the minister was the director of the law firm. How is he responding to this report?
Well, firstly, thank you for having us, and good evening or good afternoon to our viewers. Firstly, it's just a very curious way of framing the story, in that, you know, when there's a company discretion, it's very seldom that we see the director of the firm sort of being at the center of that indiscretion. Normally, the firm itself would have to answer for whatever indiscretion is alleged. And in this case, somehow GroundUp has chosen to just pierce the corporate veil and directly implicate the director, which in this case is the minister. Moreover, to say that it's the Justice Minister's firm when he had resigned, does smack of a very high level of ingenuity. And in Raymond Joseph's own words, there's no evidence whatsoever that this was a clandestine move by Ronald Lamola to collude or to act corruptly. But still, we sit with an article that insinuates that this may have happened. And so it's quite a concerning article. But I suppose in the world of freedom of press, these are some of the things that we'll have to contend with. But like I say, in his own words, there's no shred of evidence that Ronald Lamola clandestinely went and shielded the NLC people from corruption or whoever was being investigated by the NLC. So then one wonders what becomes the basis of the story and sort of trying to implicate Ronald Lamola directly in his individual capacity.
Mm-hmm. So, Chrispin, just to be clear, you are saying that the minister says while he was director of this law firm, he's distancing himself from this report and he's saying there's no evidence that suggests that as the director of the firm, he was involved in somehow helping hide corruption at the National Lottery. Am I getting you clear that you're saying he is in fact denying that he was somehow involved and he's not just saying GroundUp doesn't have evidence to the effect and the allegations that they're making?
I'm giving you Raymond Joseph's words directly. And one thing that the minister has often quite said around corruption is that actually when we see the corrupt acts happening in society, it's often aided by very skilled people in these companies. So for the minister to take that position publicly, confidently all the time, and then to be then allegedly implicated in an act of corruption in his previous life. Yeah,
but Chrispin, come on, you and I know that there are so many ministers, and this, not particularly this administration, but over the last couple of years, there are so many ministers that have made public statements and commitments not to be involved in corruption, only for them to do it behind the door. I can give you many examples of that. So I don't think that's the basis here. But the clarity I want from you is, are you saying that the minister can say now that there is no basis to the allegations that are made in this article? He wasn't involved in those reports. And is he going to speak to the law firm? Is he aware if the law firm was in fact involved in what the article is alleging? Because from what I got from GroundUp, Raymond, that we spoke to earlier, the law firm didn't want to comment. They said this client privilege that they are observing.
Yeah, the law firm can really account for itself, and that's the principle here. The separation of the minister from the law firm also. And when he was acting there, he was not acting in any way in public power or using public power. So he was acting as a director at the time, and that must be really borne in mind.
Okay.
So drawing him in as a minister is what is problematic here. In no way was he a minister at the time. He was simply a director of a law firm. But even then, you then have to get the law firm to respond to say, this is a report that you had authored. There are indiscrepancies with the report. What is your view? And that's the end of the matter. But then to drag the person of the minister into something that happened when he was no longer a director, when he was a director of a firm and not a minister, I think is the sinister element that we must really highlight in this story.
I disagree, Chrispin, and I hear your point that the minister's made it very clear that there's no evidence, he wasn't involved, but I disagree that we cannot hold people accountable on the basis that they're no longer with a particular institution. If this story was true, if this law firm, in fact, and what GroundUp says is true, and if this law firm was involved in providing and working on these reports that helped hide corruption at the National Lottery and the minister was somehow involved, that would still be important for us to establish, whether he is now out of that institution or not.
I think you're absolutely right. That is not debatable. But it's not a speculative exercise, and you don't pierce the corporate veil willy-nilly. You do so with evidence, and you bring forward that evidence before tarnishing someone's name who said, for instance, Clement Manyatela, who is at eNCA, did 1, 2, 3. It's eNCA at some point that has to respond. And if there's even further evidence that beyond the eNCA corporate veil, Clement Manyatela was really instrumental in putting the firm into disrepute, you produce that evidence, but you don't first engage in a speculative exercise, tarnishing the name of Clement Manyatela. Meanwhile, there's an entire entity ahead of him that could really account for what is at play.